Good afternoon, good evening, good night, good morning, whatever time it is for you. Met or unmet friend, I hope you're well. Buenos dias, buenas noches, buenas tardes, ¿cómo estás, amigo? So I've been trying to formulate in my mind how to speak on this topic, which is the heaven and hell I can prove exist, and also legacy, which tie into each other. And there's been really hard to articulate things that have kind of been stirring up in me that are in contrast to how I've been living in beliefs I've had, and that's difficult to handle. There's things I've wanted to say and talk about that perhaps I best remain private out of respect of other people, but I've also wanted to speak on my weaknesses, and that's hard to do without bringing other people into it. But suffice it to say, whatever that word means, suffice, I have weaknesses, and they have been affecting my life recently in important ways and in fairly serious ways. There are things that you can allow into your life that may be conscious or unconscious, or they just slip in easily because they're comfortable things and desirable things. And something I think about often is the end game and the legacy I will leave behind, and why or not that's important. And to me, it's important vitally because I have 2 daughters. I also have a family that my reputation impacts, and I also have a wife who my reputation, as well as my behavior and my disciplines and principles, impact. To put it bluntly, my primary weakness of mine is what a Catholic would say, sins of the flesh. And I was raised traditional old school Catholic. I don't identify as one currently, but there are a lot of principles and gifts that I was given from being raised in that environment that impacted me in positive ways. And some of these things that sneak into your life that you allow, they come in so pleasantly, and you might think they're healthy or expressions of love or whatever excuses you want to tag onto them, but there are more important things than immediate satisfaction, and that immediate satisfaction detracts from the energy you should be putting towards that long-term game. But there is another multitude of issues with entertaining temptations to things. There is a desire that is innate in us for the eternal, the infinite happiness, and it's not always the best way that what I just said is not exactly how some people would articulate it, but it's difficult to wrap your head around. But people want to be happy forever, and they want the forever satisfaction. They want to be immortal. And I will give you an example of some people who have succeeded in becoming immortal in just a moment. But the flesh doesn't give you immortal happiness. I'm having a hard time keeping this going. It's like 20 degrees right now, but I'm also trying to talk. There's that tension between the desire for infinite, long-lasting satisfaction. It's not always happiness. Happiness is a byproduct of completing the objective or working towards the completion of the objective. It's a byproduct. It's not the objective. So if you make your objective happiness, you're going to have your half an hour of fun, your hour, your 2 songs, whatever you want to say, your day, your week, your month, your few years of happiness. But eventually those bad decisions compound and pile up into issues that become really serious. And for example, when I'm allowing myself to, I mean, a good example, I don't have any experience with this, but if you were a heroin addict, are you going to say, well, I'm just going to smell it every now and then, I'm just going to put it in a picture frame, I'm going to have a magazine of pictures of it, I'm going to hang out with friends and just kind of look at it and smell? I'm not going to do any, I'm just going to hang out around it and talk about it and whatever. Do you think that's going to end well? You have to take yourself out of the environment, which is so difficult to do for some things, especially with, I mean, for being attracted to women as a man. I'm going to have to be around women for the rest of my life. That's just how it is. But the thing that keeps me scared of not death, but of hell, of a living hell, which is the topic I'm getting to here, and sorry if I'm taking forever to get around to it. My children and the people associated with me do not deserve to have their life affected negatively because of things I wanted now. If I want to create a living heaven and a heaven after I'm gone for them, what does that mean? As well as for myself. Well, if I set aside these things and my focus is a strong family, strong, intelligent children, and a strong, intelligent self that's operated on principles and axioms. An axiom, I think I wrote down no, I didn't write down the definition. An axiom is a belief with which you center yourself around. There's the movie WALL-E. The boat, they're the ship they're in space is literally called the Axiom. It's what they put their faith in to provide their infinite source of food, and they've been floating around in space for hundreds of years when they've literally forgotten that they need to go back to Earth and tend to the land and clean up the mess they made. That's a really strong, powerful example of things I'm talking about here. They created a living hell on Earth. They just trashed it so bad that they had to leave. I cannot just leave things I have set into place like children. If you want to get into statistics and learn about fatherless homes, and you start looking that up, you probably already know from personal experience or people you know, it doesn't end well. It's not good for the children or the society as a whole. It's the #1 predictor of poverty. It creates a living hell, and they don't deserve that. I chose to bring the children in the world. They didn't choose to be here. I owe them everything. They owe me nothing. And to create a living heaven, to create that immortal self and that infinite happiness takes a lot of hard work, but it also takes a little bit of work to go to the opposite direction. And in the end, you have so much more work to do if you want to reverse all that. And I was going to give an example of people I believe are immortal. First one that comes to mind is, and now I can't think of his name, now that I'm thinking about it. He wrote a book called Meditations, Marcus Aurelius. He was an emperor of Rome. This book was written almost roughly 2,000 years ago. This guy is still talked about. His book is still purchased. Worthwhile book to invest in, or listen to the audiobook, or just listen to people talk about it. It's the kind of book you can flip to any page and just read something and have something to take away. That book was not written for other people. It was essentially a journal for him to better himself by documenting and meditating on Stoic principles. And he probably would be embarrassed if he knew that we were still that he knew if it was published and we're talking about it, and because it was pretty private and somewhat embarrassing, I imagine. Not that there's too many visceral or invasive topics in the book, but here's a guy who was an emperor and struggled with simple things like getting out of bed in the morning, with trying to be a good person in a palace, and in knowing that there are good people that come out of stables, and it should be possible to come out of a palace as a good person. This man is truly immortal in the fact that his memory is kept alive. He created a heaven for himself. He was probably and most definitely not a perfect person, as evidence of the fact that he started writing this book. And if there was no opposite force to this, if there was no evil, no darkness, it wouldn't matter at all. It wouldn't even exist. This book, his memory, it wouldn't be there, because it wouldn't matter. There's no, if we were just intrinsically good and had no inclination to darker things, then I don't even know if the universe and the world as a whole would exist. I don't see how it could be subtracted. And if you're out in the world long enough, I need to turn the heat on, guys. I'm getting shivery, so I apologize if it messes with the audio. If you're around it doesn't take long to look around the world and see that there is true evil. And if you experience enough things and keep your eyes and ears open, do some research, or even just look deeper into things that are right in front of you, there is some true, incredibly terrifying evil in the world. And for every force, there's an equal and opposite force. So that means there is a true, beautiful light to the darkness, and that should be exciting. There's an interview by, I apologize for rambling, guys. I wanted to have some notes. This is kind of a practice video. I may just release it, but it may just be practice. But I don't want to read from notes and just sound like a robot. I want it to come from a personal place that's not overly pedicured. There's an interview with Lex Friedman and Jordan Peterson. And if you just type those two things in, Lex Friedman, L-E-X, and Jordan Peterson, should be easy to spell that, you'll see the interview. It's 3 hours long, and it's worth your time. Figure out how to listen to that video. Trying to get my mind on the right spot here. There's a part in there where Jordan says, "I'm more afraid of hell than death." And Lex asks him, are you afraid of death because of the thing that follows? And Jordan says, "I don't know if it follows or if it's always here." And and Lex asks him a little bit more, do you believe in hell or something along those lines, or what do you think happens? And he says, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. He said it like 4 times. And Jordan is the kind of guy that usually has a well thought through answer for most things. That's an incredible guy. I believe Jordan Peterson is going to become an immortal person. He's going to be remembered, and he's an impressive example of the good in the world. If there's such a thing as a saint, I think Jordan Peterson is one. Are you afraid of death because of the thing that follows? He says, I don't know if it follows or if it's always here. Now, I believe that hell is here. Heaven is also here. What's after actual death? Don't know. But I can prove to you. I don't need to prove to you. Just look around. Just think of people you've lost. Did they set an example? Did they kind of just float through life? What weaknesses did they have, and how did they try to work on them? And he's more afraid, Jordan Peterson said, he's more afraid than hell than of death. He's more afraid, and I imagine his definition of hell is similar to what I'm thinking. He may have some other beliefs that he's not willing to share, but imagine if, it's hard to imagine if Jordan Peterson were an evil person. It would not be good. Thinking how intelligent that guy is, if he just wanted to flip-flop back over, it would not be good. Who knows how many lives that guy has saved. So legacy, I wrote some definitions. I believe defining what your word means and getting on the same page is important. And my little girl has dribbled on my notebook with her pen. Legacy is a thing handed down by a predecessor. A lesson, a memory, a story, an impact. Maybe a physical thing. Maybe your legacy is that you built a business, you built a house, you built a story. Stories are important. It's how people work. They work on stories, and that's why things like the Bible and other people's religious teachings and stuff have been passed down. Not necessarily because they're on a technical level true stories, but because the lesson in them is important. And I wish people talked a little bit more about that when I was a child, because everything was kind of pushed in your face as being, this is how it is, this is real, everything in this is true, anything outside is untrue. And that is, I believe, a primarily faulty thought process, because old stories, you're playing a game of telephone, it's going to change, but the lesson has stayed the same for a lot of these stories, because they're timeless stories, which is why Marcus Aurelius' book, The Meditation, almost 2,000 years old, and he's talking about that stuff that today we struggle with. It's amazing. And a definition of heaven: a place, state, or experience of supreme bliss. A place, state, or experience of supreme bliss. Those are all things you can create now, that you can share with others, and that can last beyond you when you're gone if you put in the work. Hell: a place or state of misery, torment, or weakness. Misery, torment, or I believe I said weakness. It could be, but also what I wrote down was wickedness. A place or state of torment, misery, or wickedness. When my weaknesses were compounding and repeating in patterns and going in the wrong direction, they created a state of misery and torment in my home, to where my wife felt disrespected, disregarded, maybe replaceable, which is a word I have used and I regret using it in certain circumstances, and I apologize to her for that. The mother of my daughter is not replaceable. The father of my children, myself, I am not replaceable. Doesn't mean someone could come in and do a better job if I really mess up. And to get over, I have to thank someone, actually. There's I think it's fair to give him a shout out. I hope he is okay with it. There's a podcast or a YouTube channel called the Catholic Family Podcast. Now, I know I said I don't identify as a Catholic at the moment. Maybe someday in the future that'll change. I don't say yes or no to that right now, but I do know I have to change things and I have to go in a different direction, and maybe that'll be a part of it. But the Catholic Family Podcast, the host is a guy called Kevin Davis, and because of my faults and my weaknesses, it got to the point where something was released publicly, and he respectfully, verbally, and figuratively slapped me in the face and said this needs fixed. Essentially, he didn't exactly say those things. He was pretty articulate and respectful, but very clear that this is a problem. And I knew it was a problem at the time, but because I had trashed not every part of my legacy at the time was trashed, but I had done some damage for sure. I wasn't being listened to, and why should I have been? I didn't deserve to be listened to at the time, because I was being a hypocrite, saying one thing and then doing another. And he set a great example, and maybe there was some fate, or some people would say divine providence, behind him coming in and saying this is a problem when other people were saying this is a good thing for their own personal reasons, which are probably clouded by other issues and hidden behind certain terms that society uses a lot now. I want to be vague just to respect the dignity of certain people that I care about greatly. But it helped. He respectfully stepped in and intervened, and I think it was necessary. He did the right thing, and it helped me and the other party involved. And it didn't fix the issue. It helped open some eyes, and I had to do some work afterwards to rebuild my respect, and I'm still doing that. You know, this is a fresh issue. These are fresh wounds, but after having some talks afterwards with the person I care about, we're going in the right direction, and we're still making some changes, and still going to have to go in some directions. But I think that person, Kevin, he's going to have a good legacy if he keeps doing what he's doing. He's going to potentially immortalize himself. He's going to become immortal. People are going to be able to access his content, and he's setting a memory up that will last beyond him, and that's powerful. I believe he's going from a good man to a great man. Now, I went to school with him, but he was a generation above me, and I don't know him too well on a personal level, but he's being a shining example right now, and I want to do that also. And other people like Jordan Peterson, Marcus Aurelius, Brian, the owner of a machine shop I worked with, he was a shining example. All these other people were shining examples that go beyond their mortal life, go beyond their faults, their weaknesses, their failings. they're creating a heaven around them and around themselves and their families. And that's so powerful. Their legacy is going to be so strong and impressive and beautiful. And I want to go from a good man to a great man. And defining what a good man is, defining what a man is first, a good man and a great man, is maybe a conversation for a different time. I'd like to clearly define those things. So as a young boy, the word man kind of always was a thing to me. I always wondered, when do I get to say I'm a man? And when some people say they're a grown man and they're not in certain positions, part of me is like, are you still just a guy? What is a man? Anyone can be a guy, but what's a man really mean? I'm not talking the biological sense. I mean, I'm talking in what is your legacy? What do you stand for? Are you being a man's man? Are you a men among men? Or are you just a guy around boys? And to me, for me to call myself a man, I had to be independent as much as possible. And I worked on that a lot as what you could say a prepper, survivalist in society and in nature. I wanted to be the guy that could go it alone. And recently I've been looking for and thinking about what community do I need to put myself in to be among men who are trying to better themselves. And that's something that's really important. I think very important. And the problem for me is I want to be so independent, and I don't necessarily love being around lots of people, but I do believe it's important, and I had some ideas of certain areas I wanted to go to be around those groups. Perhaps jiu-jitsu. The gym is a decent place. I have a setup at home, but the gym is a nice energy environment. But there's also a lot of temptation there. And I think when you allow yourself to slip into comfortable weaknesses, you put an energy out there that you're available for certain things, and then those things come to you. And I'm essentially saying there are things that come really easy, and there are things that come very hard. And publicly admitting that I'm goofing up, that I'm trying to get better, that I need help, that I am asking publicly to respectfully, but if not possible to be respectfully, please slap me in the face if I'm goofing up. And well, going a blank here. Maybe I've said what I felt to say, and maybe I've done that well, maybe I haven't. Your legacy is important. You can't create a living hell, you can create a living heaven. One is easier than the other, one is more enjoyable, one's more comfortable. One's kind of embarrassing. One gives you crazy looks. One makes you sound like a religious fanatic, a person with identity politics, or whatever you want to call it. I've said before that I am a spiritual person, not a religious person. And there's a video on the Catholic Family podcast where an interviewer mentioned that people, it's a kind of a common thing for people to say they're spiritual and they don't really know what they mean behind it. And I do know what I mean when I say that, but he also pokes some holes in it. If you believe there's an infinite and a divine, and if I say divine, I kind of am thinking of the pure good that is out there, that is very apparent. We wouldn't be existing in a functioning society, even if it's got holes in it. We wouldn't be here with these beautiful things and beautiful atmospheres if there wasn't that good there. So there has to be that good force out there, whatever you want to call that good force. I would call it the universe and the energy and the life force that is around us, and I think that's apparent. Is there more to it than what those words encompass? I'm not sure. But this makes me think of something that they talked about in the Jordan Peterson and Lex Friedman interview. I wrote it down. I wrote down exactly what they said, but he essentially said your axioms define you, and your axioms, your principal primary belief that guides you. And someone might say, oh, I don't have any principal axioms that guide me. He said, well, then your he had a big word that I had to look up, and I wrote it down, but I don't have my notes on my phone. You are intellectually and on a knowledge basis confused beyond belief if you don't think that there's any axioms or beliefs that are fundamental to the way you operate. Even not having a belief is a belief. You're saying, I don't think there's something out there, or I don't think there's primary truths in nature. And there are primary truths. That's why we have science and physics and laws that actually work, that allow us to create things. And when you have a confusion, a multitude of axioms, it's the basis of anxiety, and anxiety balloons out into depression and anger and hatred and resentment and all these other, it creates that living hell that I'm talking about when you have that confusion or just the wrong beliefs. If you believe something's okay and healthy and body positivity and free love or whatever, what happens in the long term, the end game of that? Well, you just have to look at these people that embody these beliefs and how's their life really going. They might look good on the surface, they might be attractive and pretty, and they might have their beautiful Instagram and their nice car and stuff, but is that foundation built on debt, on lust, on addiction, on resentment? You have to look deeper than the cover of the book, because some of these things that look nice are really sad. And there's a part in the interview also where Jordan says, I believe if you look into the abyss long enough, you see the light. And Lex asks him, do you really believe that? Jordan says, I'm betting my life on it. If you look long enough into the abyss, you will see the light. One thing that makes me think of is the Nazi death camps where they experimented on people. If you want to hear some sad stories, you can look into the death camps and the scientists that the Nazis had, and the experiments they did on people. Just pure evil towards humans. But all that research was sitting there, and are people just going to throw away something they learned just because it came from a bad place? Well, that's not really a good idea, and that's why the America captured these scientists and didn't just kill them or imprison them. They essentially gave them jobs, and some of them went to work at NASA, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But something like pest control, where do you think some of these chemicals were discovered and their effects? Well, some of them were tested on people. And that gives us the ability to keep insects out of food, out of whatever. It gives us a lot of chemicals that are useful today. There's some other things that escape my mind right now that come from these knowledge of hypothermia, of how to heal certain diseases, of how certain diseases spread, the effects, how to heal certain wounds. These things came from really, truly evil, dark places that would make most comfortable Americans throw up and scar them forever. But we're living in this comfortable world because of that abyss of darkness. Doesn't mean we can excuse these evils. There's better ways to learn things than experimenting on humans. But it does mean you can look towards someone who's going the wrong direction and learn that that is the wrong direction. And maybe by understanding that, you can find out how to help them, which is the important part that creates that heaven. And there's one person specifically that I'm really worried about that's going the wrong direction, and I hope they're okay. But I got to the point where I feel like I had to just step back and not communicate for the time being, because I don't think I was capable of helping, and maybe I just wasn't being listened to, and maybe what I had to say wasn't helpful enough, or coming from the right place, or from the right person at the right time. And it's an obvious fact, you can't help everyone, but it's probably worth trying. And I appreciate the person who publicly and verbally and metaphorically slapped me, told me to fix something, essentially. I appreciate that. Sure, it was embarrassing, but what would be more embarrassing if my problems compounded and become even more public and even more hard to fix. That's shameful, and that destroys my legacy and creates a living hell. And I don't think that's acceptable. Well, my longest video yet. Thanks for being here if you made it this far. If you wouldn't mind, when you like my video, it actually does make me a little happy. It makes me feel like maybe I said something right, I'm doing something right, and I'm helping someone, or makes me feel good. I would appreciate it if you made me feel good for a couple seconds. If you want to subscribe, that would be cool. But the likes would be cool, for selfish reasons. Comments would be also cool to hear your thoughts. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourself. If I make a mistake, please slap me. If I see you mistake something and I think I can help, please forgive my audacity for thinking that I might be able to help. Hopefully it's coming from a good place. Have a good night, good evening, good morning. And ciao.